It is amazing to be with you here tonight. When Rich asked if I wanted to come, of course, I was like, yes, I would love to. And he said I could choose who I wanted to talk about, which set my mind reeling because, of course, in the Bible, there are so many people that you could choose to talk about. But I landed on Ruth. And I love Ruth. It's one of my favorite books in the Bible, and it is sandwiched in between Judges and 1 and 2 Samuel. So Judges is this weighty book which talks about basically all of the ways that God's people, Israel, fail. And then Samuel is like this dramatic book. Loads of stuff happens. It's like the rise of King David and all of that stuff. And in the middle is this little small book, Ruth. And it is set in this context of unrest, and it's a gem of hope and redemption. So that's one of the reasons I love it so much. And all the way through, we can see that Ruth's life is marked by purpose. So the general arc of the story of the book goes sort of sadness and trials to a great show of faithfulness, and then generosity, like going above and beyond what's expected, and then ends up with redemption. Spoiler alert, it's a happy ending. Don't we all love a happy ending? So at the beginning of the book, we meet this family, Elimelech and his wife Naomi, and they've got 2 sons, and they live in Bethlehem in Judah, and there is a famine going on, and so they decide that they're going to move to a place called Moab because they want a better life. So they go out and move across, but sadly, Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi a widow with her 2 sons. Now, 2 sons get married to one named Ruth and one named Orpah. But then, sadly, the 2 sons die as well. So now Naomi is widowed and she has no sons. And she's left with these 2 daughters-in-law. And they're left kind of to fend for themselves. So not a great start for these women. But Naomi hears that back in her hometown, Bethlehem, God has come to the aid of his people and the famine's over. So she thinks, right, get me back home, I'm going. But doesn't actually think that it's that fair to ask her daughters-in-law to go with her. So they head out and they start going. Orpah, in the end, actually goes back to her family, which there's nothing wrong with that. But Ruth, remarkably, says that she'll go with Naomi. So this is where the faithfulness starts coming into play. And in chapter 1, verse 8, Naomi says, "Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me." And Ruth says, a little bit later in verse 16, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." And that last one is pretty radical because she's not one of God's people. She's a Moabite. So this is kind of risky devotion that Ruth is showing here because Naomi can't provide for Ruth. And she's going to be going back to a foreign land, and she's not going to have anyone to support her, and she's going to be a widow as well. So this is really risky devotion, and she's showing a really great loyalty to Naomi here. And at this moment, at this point of no return, Ruth decides to take a huge leap of faith and to follow the one true God. She says, "Your God will be my God." So they go back to Bethlehem, Naomi and Ruth, together, and they cause a bit of a stir because they're like, "Oh, is this Naomi? Has she come back? Oh, who's this other one?" So they go back, and in that first verse we read, when Naomi talks about the kindness that they've shown her, the word kindness doesn't actually do justice to what they're talking about. So when she blesses Ruth with the kindness from the Lord, the Hebrew word they use is hesed, which is roughly translated as love in action. And there's one theologian who said, "Hesed intervenes on behalf of loved ones and comes to their rescue." I love that. Hesed intervenes on behalf of loved ones and comes to their rescue. So this kindness that they're talking about is a deep, active kindness, like an undeserved act of generosity. So that is the kind of kindness that's being shown here. So Naomi blesses them with this kindness, but Ruth actually says, no, do you know what? I am going to show an act of deep kindness to you. I am going to come with you. And it's this unrestrained generosity and kindness that moves the story along to getting closer towards this point of redemption. So, side note, they go back to Bethlehem, and Bethlehem means house of bread, and that is no coincidence, seeing as when they get back, they both have all of their needs met with a bountiful harvest. So, I thought that was pretty cool. So that was kind of the faithfulness revealed section. So there's like the faithfulness revealed and then the faithfulness rewarded. So we're going on into that section now. Enter Boaz. Boaz is a cool guy. He is somebody who is actually from the clan of Elimelech. So just park that in your brain and remember that for a little bit later. So once they get back, Ruth decides that she's going to go gleaning in the fields, which gleaning is when you go and follow the harvesters and pick up the leftover grain that's there. And that's how she thinks, okay, this is how I'm going to provide for Naomi and how I'm going to provide for me. But here's where the plot thickens, because the field she ends up in is Boaz's field. It belongs to Boaz. So Ruth is working hard, and when Boaz comes back to his field, he notices her and asks, who is this young woman? And the guy overseeing tells him that she's the Moabite that's come back with Ruth. And I get the feeling that this guy was quite impressed, maybe a little bit shocked, and kind of surprised at Ruth. Because he says in chapter 2, verse 7, she asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes' rest in the shelter. And I would imagine he would say it something a bit more like this. Right, Boaz, she came to me first thing this morning, and she's been working ever since really hard, and she has not even stopped for a break. It is really hot, it is really hard work, and she has just been go, working really hard. And so Boaz notices this, and he's like, wow, okay, what is this woman working so hard for? I want you to imagine yourself on a really hot day in a field. You've not got comfy shoes on. You don't even have any tunes to keep the good vibes going while you're working in the fields. And you are going up and down and up and down, bending down, picking up single strands of straw and little bits of grain, because that's all you've got going for you. You've got to do that really, really hard work. That is how hard Ruth was working in the field. And so Boaz sees this, and in verse 8, he says to Ruth, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water that they have drawn from the well. So Ruth here, what she's doing is she's persevering through her circumstance. She is trusting that by working hard, she is going to be able to provide for her and for Naomi. But what we see in Boaz is that actually she's also now got someone in her corner. She's got someone supporting her. She's got someone protecting her. So that hesed is kind of showing itself in Ruth's hard work and motivating, her love is motivating her. But Boaz clearly has a very kind character. He is a kind character and he's impacted by what she's doing. And so that's where we see her faithfulness to Naomi is being rewarded. It's being rewarded by Boaz, who has a great, kind character. And in the way he begins to respond and interact with Ruth, we can really see him modeling God. He's protecting her, he's providing for her, and he's giving her refreshment. He says to her, you can go and drink from the well, from the water, the jugs that they've already got out, which in that hot day, you're going to need that refreshment. So he's modeling what God was doing through him. So, that Ruth goes above and beyond for Naomi, and then Boaz begins to go above and beyond for Ruth. And the next bit of the story gets even more exciting. So remember we said that Boaz is from the clan of Elimelech, which was Naomi's husband. That means there was something back in those days called a guardian redeemer, or sometimes called a kinsman redeemer or restorer. And what one of those people is they have a requirement, an opportunity to look after a close relative that is in distress or that is in a severe, difficult time. And Naomi realizes that Boaz is this for them. He is their guardian redeemer. And so she says to Ruth, go to Boaz and let him know that he is our redeemer. So she goes, Naomi, to the threshing floor, which was actually quite a dangerous place for women to go. It's where they sorted out the crop that they'd gathered and made sure that it was the useful and the valuable crop that was kept. So she goes there, and she's hoping that Boaz will marry her, because that would mean that he could carry on their family line and that they would have security. So long story short, in chapter 3, Ruth goes there and she's completely vulnerable before Boaz, and she asks him to redeem them. And Boaz is struck by this, and he actually takes this request as a kindness towards him. He is more than willing to marry her, and he jumps at the opportunity, saying in verse 10, "The Lord bless you, my daughter. You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before. For you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what's necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous woman." And some other translations say, "I will do whatever you ask," which is amazing. He's just met this woman, and he says, I'm going to redeem you. I will do it. So it turns out that there's actually someone else that's more closely related. So they have to check first that that person doesn't want to redeem Ruth and Naomi. But that guy, he thinks a little bit too much about himself, perhaps, because he thinks that it might risk his own property. It might endanger his own estate. So Boaz, he gets to jump at the opportunity, and he buys Naomi's land, and he marries Ruth. Happy ending. Married Ruth, secure Naomi, everything's great. We love a happy ending. But the great thing about this is it's not just a happy ending for Ruth. It is a redemption of a whole people. So the book ends with a genealogy, which is a list of names, a family tree. And I'm going to rattle off this list now, so get ready. Okay. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Aminadab. Aminadab, the father of Nashon. Nashon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of David. That's King David. So Ruth and Naomi, they get integrated into the line of King David, going from an ordinary family, with one of whom who was a foreigner, and a pretty desperate situation. And they go from that, seemingly destined for poverty, to being integrated into a royal lineage. And Naomi and Ruth's lives could have so easily been defined by their circumstance, but Ruth doesn't let that happen. Instead, she shows huge faithfulness, and she shows a huge kindness, that hesed kindness, a deep love in action kindness, and ultimately follows God, which results in this great redemption. Which made me think, you never know how God is going to use the decisions you make in difficult times. Ruth didn't know that when she decided to follow God, that when she decided to stick with Naomi, that he would use that decision to bring about not only redemption for her and Naomi, but to be part of this great, big, wide story of a bigger redemption in Jesus. So I love looking at the whole arc and the whole journey of this book, which is why we sort of did a whistle-stop tour of it. But when you zoom out and you look at the two main characters of Ruth and Boaz, what we get is this beautiful reflection of us and God, which I love. We get that reflection of us and God. Because that Hesed love, that love in action, the deep kindness, is what God has for us. That grace that God has. He's our protector. He's our provider. He rewards our faithfulness when we choose to follow him. So what does that mean for us? Like, how, that's a great story, but how does this impact our lives right now? Well, Ruth is a wonderful example of selfless faith. It's bold, it's risky. She took a risky, faithful decision. And it's showing people acts of undeserved generosity. Selfless faith looks like all of that. And yes, she did that because I assume she was a lovely person by nature. She had it in the good of her heart. But also, she did it because she chose to follow the one true God. She chose to become part of God's people. So she was thrown forward into that life by following God. But that's only one side of it. Yes, Ruth did all those amazing things. Ruth was a wonderful servant and showed great love. But ultimately, she was redeemed by a guardian redeemer. Boaz says, "Stay here. Stay in my field where you'll be safe and looked after. Stay here and let me provide for you." He says, "When you're tired out, take water from the jugs that we've prepared." And that's what God says for us. God refreshes our souls when we need it. So when we do kingdom work, when we do work for the good of others, for the glory of God, or even when we just carry on, sometimes it's just as simple as putting one foot in front of the other and thinking, this is all I've got. I'm going to carry on, but I'm going to carry on living for God. When we do that, God makes the water jugs of living water available to us all the time, infinitely, through Jesus Christ. And there is always a bigger story being told. And as Christians, we believe that the Bible is all God-breathed and inspired by the Holy Spirit. So when we read the book of Ruth, we read it knowing that God is leading us towards the ultimate guardian redeemer, who is Jesus. He lived, and he died, and he lived again for our sakes. And that will never go away. So let's be like Ruth. Let's take on that challenge of unwavering faith. Let's take big steps. Let's take small steps. Let's be that Hesed in the world. Let's give undeserved grace and generosity to others. Let's be motivated by the love of God, and let's follow him always. Let's take up that. It's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for all of us. But at the same time as that, let's give praise to God the Father, who, like Boaz, protects, refreshes, and redeems us. In chapter 4, verse 14. It's after they've done the legal bit. He's taken off his sandal and he's given it to the guy. That's how they did legal things in those days. Sounds a lot simpler than some of our legal things, but apparently, who knew? Sandal is quite important. Anyway, it's after that legal bit, and the people have seen Naomi come back from a really bitter place when she returned to Bethlehem. So she said, don't call me by my name because I'm bitter now. So they've seen all of that and they've witnessed this redemption. And they say in verse 14, praise the Lord who has now provided a redeemer for your family. God didn't leave them. Oh, that's it. Praise the Lord who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. So, side note, Ruth has a baby. That's important. Ruth has a baby, which carries on this lineage, the thing. So, Jesus is our guardian redeemer, and he will never leave you. Just like God didn't leave Naomi and Ruth without a guardian redeemer. God will never, ever leave you or me without a guardian redeemer, and that's Jesus.